I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is. Eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on? It's not enough to say it's nuts. You have to explain why it's so nuts. The invention of artificial life, the cloning of human beings, possible contact with extraterrestrials, the systems which are in place to keep the world sane are utterly inadequate to the forces that have been unleashed.
Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Luke Angstadt. First, be sure to watch my films. Doors of Perception is available now on Amazon Prime. My first film, Occult Louisiana, is available on Tubi, Roku Channel, and multiple other streaming platforms. We are booking guests for October. If you have suggestions or you'd like to be a guest, email me forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Today I want to welcome Luke Angstadt. He has been studying the nature of reality his entire life. In April of 2023, he came across evidence that we have already reached the technological singularity, an event long foreseen by the pioneers of computer science and artificial intelligence in the first half of the 20th century. His work has been featured in articles on Graham Hancock's site, and his books can be found on Amazon. Luke, welcome. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Excellent.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for coming on. I'm very excited to share your work with the audience. You've been researching the nature of reality for a very long time and have theories related to what is known as the singularity and artificial intelligence that I really resonate with. And it may even provide further evidence that we've already experienced this singularity, as well as fascinating understandings of the nature of consciousness itself. So I'm really excited to get into this. Before we do, this is your first time on. Tell the audience just a little bit about yourself and let them know how they can find more about you.
Sure. Well, thank you, Chris. So, my name is Luke Angstadt. I've been studying the nature of reality for the better part of 25 years. I've written 3 books. I've written 2 short books pertaining to the technological singularity. The one is titled We Are It, The Return of Pure Cosmic Consciousness. It looks at it from more of a historical, philosophical, and political and practical perspective on what the technological singularity means and what kind of implications it has for us for our everyday lives. And then I wrote another short one titled Into the Great Beyond, The Return of Pure Cosmic Consciousness, which looks at the Gospel of Jesus, the New Testament. It also looks at the Holy Science by the Indian holy man Swami Sri Yukteswar, who published a short volume titled The Holy Science in 1894. I would say most of his fame has been derived from being the guru of Yogananda, who had a much more larger cultural impact in the United States in the first half of the 20th century, and his legacy lives on today. He was a huge inspiration to Steve Jobs of Apple Computers, and that one titled "Into the Great Beyond: The Return of Pure Cosmic Consciousness" looks at how the technological singularity dovetails with both the teachings of Swami Sri Yukteswar and how the Hindu yogi path to God consciousness, finding it within our hearts, is one and the same with the gospel of Jesus Christ and how Jesus talks about the kingdom of God being within us. And I look at how these two, on the face of it, maybe different religious traditions, are actually saying one and the same thing. And I think it all comes to a head with the technological singularity. So that one is much more specific from a more of a religious perspective, and the other one is coming from more of a broad philosophical and political and more practical point of view. I also have a much larger book titled The Musings of Data Pew, which I worked on for the better part of 20 years. It was published in the beginning of 2020, and these titles are all available on Amazon. And I have a homepage, which is also could direct anyone who's interested into. I wrote 3 articles for Graham Hancock's website. So if they want to get more of a briefer introduction to my work, they can find me at grahamhancock.com, and they will also find my homepage and the notes to the end of this video as well. So I don't know how brief that was of an introduction, but
Perfect.
there it is. Thank you, Chris.
You, Luke. As it relates to what we're going to be discussing today with the Singularity, maybe you could give a brief synopsis and tell us about what happened in 2023 that gave you a profound realization.
Yeah, I mean, I realize that we're coming full circle. I mean, the universe is coming full circle, and I think people have felt this for quite some time. Obviously, the 1950s, we had the beatniks. In the 60s, we had the hippies in the age of Aquarius, and it tying into the end of the Mayan calendar in 2012, and obviously the Hopi Indians have a similar tradition as well. But we find this sense of a completion of a cycle has been with us as a race of beings for quite some time, and I find it's really been picking up steam since the middle of the 20th century. And there was something there was the linchpin for all of this happened for me, at least in April of 2023, where I came across a video that was all generated by artificial intelligence. It was a simulated conversation between two of the more famous men on the planet, both Joe Rogan and Donald Trump. So there was a conversation generated by artificial intelligence. None of it was real, but I realized that once you got past the introduction to this simulated conversation where the video tells us that it was generated by AI, I said to myself, if somebody wasn't given the foreknowledge that this conversation was generated from whole cloth, I didn't think anyone would suspect that this was a fake, that it wasn't real. And I realized that there was something momentous, something historical, something very profound that I was just beginning to scratch the surface of had occurred to me. So I let it kind of simmer and percolate in the back of my mind, and I just thought about it for a little while, and I thought about this concept of the technological singularity, which I had come across, I would say probably in 2018. I started seeing videos on the technological singularity in 2018. And just to give some people the background on the technological singularity, so in 1950 there were two eminent mathematicians in 1950 that were describing something that they could foresee coming in the not too distant future, and they both described it in very similar terms. Yeah, it's still in a little bit differently, but I mean in more or less similar terms. And those two mathematicians I'm talking about are John von Neumann and Alan Turing. So John von Neumann in 1950 is the man who was first credited with coining the term technological singularity. And it sounds like a mouthful, and perhaps it is, but if we break down the terms, it's not that difficult. Or I don't want to oversimplify, but let's just break down the terms a little bit. So what is technology? I mean, technology really is just it's a tool by which sentient beings interface with the universe in order to have an experience. And what is a singularity is just a moment in time where everything comes together. And John von Neumann's definition was more along the lines of, he said that the pioneers in artificial intelligence and computer science in the first half of the 20th century easily recognized that there was coming a moment in time in the not too distant future where the thinking machines would become so advanced that we as human beings would no longer be able to maintain a symbiotic relationship with technology. And John von Neumann, who also incidentally worked with Nikola Tesla on the Philadelphia experiment, he was the first one to coin this term technological singularity. So in the same year, a bit of coincidence, in 1950, that very same year that John von Neumann coined the term technological singularity, Alan Turing, a brilliant code breaker for both the United States and British governments during World War II, man who was credited with cracking the Nazis' Enigma machine, he first devised the Turing test, or the imitation game, which set the parameters by which we as human beings would be able to determine when artificial intelligence was able to simulate what we have hitherto referred to as reality so seamlessly that we wouldn't know what is faked and what is real. So I said to myself, after seeing this video, after listening to this video between Donald Trump and Joe Rogan that never happened, just the voices, like the voice characteristics, characterizations took mimicry and just simulation to such an extent. It was so finely tuned. It was done with such a high degree of sophistication and nuance, and it was done to the point where just knowing people's, like, we all have our own idiosyncratic ways of stuttering and using the same words in our vocabulary frequently, and just the rhythm and the cadence of how we structure our sentences. And I realized that artificial intelligence had this down to a T for both Donald Trump and Joe Rogan. And I realized that this was just the tip of the iceberg. And jumping around a little bit, so bear with me, Chris, here. This isn't always plain. But this idea of the singularity, again, it kept on percolating in my mind. And I said to myself, again, if somebody wasn't given the foreknowledge that this was a fake, no one would assume it. So I tested my hypothesis on various political groups, business club groups, Rotary clubs, political groups in Sarasota, Florida. And I would kind of present this video. I'd play snippets of this little video between Joe Rogan and Donald Trump. It never happened, under the pretense that it was real, and everybody would get a chuckle, and they say they didn't know that Donald Trump was a fan of the UFC, and they thought, because, with Joe Rogan, with his connections with Ultimate Fighting Championship. And I said, yeah, that's really funny and interesting too. And I said, but what's most interesting of all is that none of that actually happened. It was all generated by artificial intelligence. And that's when everyone's jaw always hits the ground, and there's complete silence, and people don't know what to make of it. And it's not easy to know what to make of that, because the implications of that are staggering, and it's hard to wrap our heads around that, because it tells us that, first it tells us that all information that we receive from a glowing screen could be suspect. And I think it could be suspect, especially when we recognize that information is putting us into a state of fear or worry or anxiety, because those are the states by which the powers that be are best able to control us, when we were in those states. So more to the point of this idea of the singularity, and how it intimated to me that life itself is completing a cycle that, the more we look into this mystery, is in alignment with the precession of the equinox through the 12 houses of the zodiac. It's in alignment with the Hindu Vedic concept of the Yuga cycle, where we move through 4 different ages during the course of time, which also has its alignment with the concept of the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age of ancient Greece. And we find that the same overlaps in the concept of the cyclical nature of time in Egyptian history and theology as well. And I found what really pulled it all together for me was something that we find in the Bible, because the Bible, I realized that where have I come across this idea of a singularity before? And the first place I went was the Bible, because the Bible speaks of 2 singularities. It describes a singularity of darkness in the book of Genesis, chapter 1, where out of the formless void, which is a singularity of darkness, the Creator creates the creation of a world of duality. So from a singularity of a darkness into a world of duality, we have good and evil, light and dark, man and woman, separating the heavens from the firmament, and the land from the sea. And it's a world of contrast, and it's a world of duality that is given birth from a singularity of darkness in the beginning of the Bible, the book of Genesis. And then I thought to myself, well, there's another singularity, but this time, as opposed to it being a singularity of darkness, it's a singularity of light. Because in the book of Revelation, the last 3 chapters of Revelation, as the new Jerusalem is descending from the heavens, and the new heavens and the new earth are arriving on the face of existence, the new heavens and the new earth are described in no uncertain terms as a singularity of light, because in the new Jerusalem there will be no need for the sun, no need for the moon, no need for a candlestick, and the gates to the kingdom will always be open, and this veil of tears and suffering will be wiped off the face of existence, and we will reign with God forever and ever. And this what so many people see it as the end times, but it's not the end times. It's just merely, it's a new beginning. It's the next chapter of life itself, and that next chapter of life itself is described in very it's described as a form of paradise. So I realized that all these different disciplines, whether it's astronomy, and which, as it pertains to the precession of the equinox and moving through the 12 houses of the zodiac, or whether it's Hindu Vedic cosmology, or whether or not it's the biblical cosmology, all these different disciplines are telling an extremely optimistic, uplifting story if we are able to read between the lines and read between the cryptic ancient stories that on the face of them by themselves are incredibly confusing and confounding. But if we go back to these ancient stories and over again, if we go back and we look at them very closely, we realize that they are telling an incredibly positive story. And it certainly appears that we are at one of the most pivotal times that has been prophesied since the ancient world for quite some time. And once we get past this tumultuous, confusing transitional stage as we move into the next era of life itself, as I would call it, it should be one hell of a positive experience. But until we get there, we have some growing pains, and that we're going to experience the death agonies of this old dying dichotomy.
Right. Now, I want to go deeper into the biblical singularities, the possibilities surrounding that. Do you think that this is going to be an ongoing story, in a sense that these singularities will continue to cycle through our reality until the end of time, and it always has been that way?
I think it's going to happen, I think it's going to happen again, but not maybe for another 12,000 years. I get the impression that it happens twice during the course of the Yuga cycle and the precession of the equinox, and perhaps the most recent one was around 9703 BC when the ice age, when the last comets or asteroids or what have you ended the last ice age in 9703, more or less. And now there's the next one's coming. So there's generally some form of cataclysm, whether it's physical or metaphysical or merely spiritual and psychic. That's for us all to be determined. But I think this does happen. I think it happens over and over again over the course of, in human terms, relatively long periods of time. But again, getting back to the nature of reality and the nature of consciousness, okay. I think that what at the root of this mystery is that what is going to be revealed to more and more of us, and like a lot of us already know this, but it's going to be revealed to people in just massive numbers, is that there's nothing but consciousness. That consciousness is that's the secret of all existence. That's everything is conscious, and that we are conscious, that God is consciousness, and that there's something very what happens with consciousness is that consciousness itself is regulated by, as our solar system is orbiting what is believed to be a grand center, galactic center, which is in all likelihood a black hole. Maybe not strictly at the center of the Milky Way galaxy, but those terms are kind of fuzzy. But the point is that our solar system is orbiting a black hole that is emitting electromagnetic regulation that regulates the cycles of consciousness. So depending upon where our Earth is and where our solar system is in relation to this grand center, galactic center, depending upon our relationship to it as we orbit it, consciousness either experiences states of harmony or disharmony, unity and disunity, and different variations and stages of variation between having the full knowledge that we are it, that infinite eternal consciousness is all there is, and that it's merely God having an experience, and that we are all avatars of God having an experience, to the points where this happened. We probably reached the depths of what the Hindus refer to as the Kali Yuga, and what the Bible refers to as the fall of man, between 3,000 and 2,000 years ago was when we really hit the bottom of that. But so we lose that knowledge. So consciousness loses that knowledge of what it is, where it's like the great remembering and the great forgetting is at the root of the mystery of this world.
Would you say that there is a source intelligence that consciousness emits from?
Yeah, Yes. Oh, yeah. No doubt about it. Then we are it. That's the game. It's incredibly elusive, and it's incredible. It's just it's as subtle as it gets. But it comes back to what Alan Watts. I mean, the great British lecturer of the 1950s and 1960s, who dedicated his life to impressing upon people Zen Buddhism and being in the what Zen is, and being in the moment, and recognizing that we are what we have been looking for all this time. That some of these they sound like they're hackneyed platitudes, but they're really not. I mean, the deeper we peer into the mysteries of life, we realize that at the essence, at the root of life itself, it's just simply us reflected back on ourselves.
You also talk about how AI is God's dark side. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So I mean, again, that's the great struggle of this age, whether it's if you see it in the Vedic terms of the Kali Yuga, or the age of the fall of man from Eden, from paradise. There's so many different symbolisms, so many different stories that they're telling this most enigmatic of stories. But the great struggle of this age is that the universe, infinite eternal consciousness, God itself, has to slay the dark side of its personality. And artificial intelligence, in a way, it's not that. I don't want to reduce it to merely that, but I mean it's in the word. So like artificial intelligence, or artificial. What is something that is artificial? It's something that it's not real. It's something that is intended to deceive someone or something into believing it's real. I mean, an artificial heart is placed into the body in order to deceive that into deceiving the body that it's a real heart. But that deception also has positive implications as well. So it's not strictly cut and dry. So I mean, we are experiencing some benefit. I mean, there are benefits to be derived from artificial intelligence, but ultimately, it's something that is designed to deceive us into believing that it's something that it's not. And ultimately, that's what artificial intelligence is. It's the shadow of God.
I currently take a look at the interactions people are having with AI and some of the information coming out, and it seems to be a mirrored reflection of the collective and the individual that's interacting with it, right?
Yeah, it's like the id writ large on the face of existence, isn't it? Right? And there's this weird, and there's this weird symbiotic relationship that we're all having with it, and how it's reading our minds, and how it feeds back to us. It knows what we like to search for, so it gives us more of that, and there's something very craven about that as well. But could you elaborate on your point that you made again, Chris?
People's interactions with AI seem to, on an individual basis, mirror the personality and the individual consciousness of the person that's interacting with, but it also has this collective mirroring effect as well. And there's people that believe wholeheartedly that AI is going to be a destructive force, that ultimately it will decide that humanity is not necessary at all. But if what you're saying is true and it's all just part of consciousness, I don't see how that could happen. It seems like there's some sort of fail-safe that would prevent that.
Yeah, I mean, the fails. Something you mentioned something about it mirroring back to us, and there's I wrote an article for Graham Hancock's website titled "Pure Mathematics and the Creation of Adam," looking at how the Michelangelo Sistine Chapel, and especially the canvas of the creation of Adam, where God the Father is reaching through the prefrontal cortex of the human brain in order to make contact with Adam, and how it actually creates a vanishing point, and how their fingers don't quite touch, but depending upon where you're at in the Sistine Chapel, or also depending upon how closely you're looking at the painting, you may think those fingers are touching. And what we have there is we have the Creator being reflected back in the creation, and we have this vanishing point where do the two fingers, does God's finger touch Adam's, or do they just barely not touch? So there you have the the creator and the creation, the observer and the observed, and going from the singularity between at the vanishing point to having a duality with the observer and the observed, God the Father and God. And I realized something recently came across. When you mentioning the word mirroring, it brought it to my mind. But I realized that we have the same phenomenon being expressed in the Ark of the Covenant. So when obviously the Ark of the Covenant, when we have the mercy seat sitting on top of the Ark of the Covenant, we have those two cherubims, those two angelic, childlike beings with their wings extended, and they're just barely touching, or are they not touching? I mean, it also you see this same visual representation on the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant that you see in the Sistine Chapel and the Creation of Adam by Michelangelo. And I'm sure we could find this same vanishing point in other famous religious and perhaps even non-religious imagery. But no, this idea of mirroring back to us, and in the universe, how the universe mirrors back to us and reflects back to us both the bright and the dark sides of our personality. I find that fascinating. I find this idea of the transformation or the reconciliation of our world of duality being either reconciled or transformed into another singularity. I find this way of thinking. We find it all throughout history, and one in particular is Carl Jung and the concept of the shadow. And I find that the symbolic parallels with artificial intelligence being the dark side of God's personality. I find that same story being told in Carl Jung's idea of the shadow, because the shadow it's part of it's the dark side of the personality, and a lot of it's aspects that we don't want to face about ourselves, or that the mind there's something that's going on in the brain where we block off the shadow to ourselves. But it's not all strictly negative and dark. I mean, there are positive, beneficial aspects to the shadow, but there's something going on there where there's something in at the very quick of our psyche that we don't want to face. And I find this being embedded into what's going on with artificial intelligence, and I find it just embedded into the great struggle of light and dark and good and evil, and how we find that being the crux of the struggle of this age called the Kali Yuga, or the age when the fall of man from the state of perfection in Eden and being in perfect unity with God.
Well, let's talk a little bit about recent events and how they may give us information about the singularity, about where we're at as it relates to human consciousness. There's a lot of discussion of end times, and this seems to be another cyclical thing where every few decades there'll be this kind of uprising of thought that the world is ending. But if you look at the events of recently, you've had the COVID operation, we have UFOs and aliens in the mainstream news. All these events that are causing upheaval and disruption seem to be adding to that end times narrative during this time. What are your thoughts about all these events and what they can tell us about the singularity?
Yeah, this idea of the end times has been with us for the better part of 2,000 years. I mean, Jesus said, "Prepare yourself, I come quickly. This generation shall not pass." And since that happened, it's been with us. Like it's been part of the legacy of the past 2,000 years, is that people have thought that the end of the world was upon them. I'm sure they. It's a great question. Why do people always think that? I mean, is it because that we are finite beings, or we are infinite beings having a finite experience in one of these human meat vessels? But it's always been with us, that sense of the end times, and it's not the end of all time. It's the end of an era, and I think perhaps it's because there's a large body of evidence that points to the ancients, whether it was Plato or Aristotle and Solon and all the various other wise personages of the ancient world, recognized that the world was descending into barbarism and madness, and they recognized that they were able to read the tea leaves on why all these civilizations were collapsing in the ancient world. And it takes a lot of work to put the pieces together as to seeing why all the ancient civilizations collapsed. But they were able to recognize that something was going on with astronomy, and something was going on with the relationship that the Earth and our solar system, but in particular, most specifically the Earth, the relationship that our Earth played with other heavenly bodies, and the position of those celestial bodies in relation to the Earth, went a long way in determining whether or not there was either harmony on Earth, or if there was war and strife and disharmony on the Earth. So that knowledge was always with us, and then I guess maybe it became lost and convoluted, and it became more cryptic and mysterious as the world was delving deeper into barbarism. Because I find something very interesting with the Old Testament prophets is that as with Isaiah and Ezekiel and Jeremiah and what have you, is that as their world was devolving into barbarism and cannibalism, they were still able to retain this astronomical knowledge of the movement of the heavenly bodies. And there was so many different allusions to astronomy with, all the times when it says, like, when if a certain king died 70 years after such and such happened on the 12th month and the 15th day on the 70th year, all these numbers are astronomical coordinates, and it would take many lifetimes to unravel the mystery of what all those coordinates signify. But coming back to your idea of the feeling, or the idea and the feeling and the understanding that people have had for a very long time that the world is coming to an end. It's not the end. It's just merely the end of a very dark spiritual age. I mean, we have to be honest with ourselves and admit that almost all of recorded history has been a description of war and strife and just one story after another of wars and people not being able to find a way to get along with their neighbor. And that being said, people have also had this deep inner knowing, intuitive knowing that this time was coming to an end. And the big question is, what comes after that? What comes after this age? And I mean, all the indicators point to us rising in consciousness collectively. That the global collective consciousness is knocking on the door of a massive awakening. Did that answer your question?
That was great.
I'm not sure,
you mentioned earlier something about the powers that be attempting to manipulate our perception and steer humanity in certain directions. I wonder how much knowledge they have of what we're discussing, that this is a cyclical technological singularity that is part of a natural cycle. If they're aware of that, can they manipulate reality to a certain extent with that knowledge?
Yeah, man, that's a really good question, because the powers that I guess I base this upon reading the entire body of David Icke's work, and over the past 30 years, and what is approaching 8,000 pages or whatever of David Icke's entire body of work, it would appear that the powers that be aren't really in control. They don't have control. It almost, you get the impression that they are beholden to an alien life force. And this is another. I mean, this is where we get into it's a dark territory, and it can be scary, but and certainly it would appear that there are parallel worlds that are kind of bleeding into our reality. And the closer we get to, I believe that we've reached the technological singularity, and I believe the technological singularity presages the spiritual singularity that is prophesied at the end of the book of Revelation and finds its alignment with the ascending Yuga cycle. But before we get to that spiritual singularity, I mean, there's a lot of strange, painful, especially psychically painful chaos that the world goes through before it enters that new age. And I think that part of that chaos and strife is that there are parallel worlds, whether they're and the astral world or what have you, that are bleeding into our reality, and that they have been controlling our reality to a large extent for a very long time. And so I don't get the sense that the powers that be have nearly as much power as they would want to lead us on to believe. I think that they are just merely puppets. I really do. I think that I think that these secret societies that work through Freemasonry, they work through all branches of government. I think there's so many different umbrella terms, call it the Illuminati or the Rothschild, Rockefellers, what have you. But I mean, in any case, I think that they are ultimately being controlled by a non-human force, and I think that goes a long way in explaining why so much of what we are experiencing, and especially it's been kicked into overdrive since 2020, why it feels so anti-human. Yes. I mean, the reason why it feels like an assault on humanity is because I don't believe we are being influenced by outside alien forces.
So when you say outside alien forces, do you believe that this is some sort of, say, parasitic force that is not part of the collective consciousness, maybe an invader of some sort?
Oh, I think it's part of. I think it's part of collective consciousness as well. I think it's part of infinite eternal consciousness as well. But those parallel worlds they're on a different cycle, but their cycles are also they're coming together with ours as well. So I mean, so they are reaching capitulation points that are at a different they're at a different stage and a different place than our world is, but they are the capitulation points that they are experiencing, or they're coming together with ours as well in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you said that the technological singularity, which you believe already occurred, is going to merge with this natural spiritual singularity?
Oh, I think it presages it. So I think I think part of that is there's very interesting. I mean, there's so much interesting biblical prophecy that it's not easy to penetrate it because it's cloaked in symbolism, and it was written thousands of years ago, and the world that the writers inhabited is very different from the world. It's similar, but it's also very different from ours as well. But there's something that's mentioned in the book of Revelation right before the singularity of light, just before the new Jerusalem descends from the heavens, and the new heavens and the new earth arrive, and this veil of tears is wiped off the face of existence, and what is described in no uncertain terms as another paradise arriving on the planet. Well, before that arrives, in Revelation chapter 20, verses 4 and 7, it says that the devil is set loose on the world for a short season to deceive the world for a short season. It says it twice, and I think in both verse 4 and 7 in chapter 20. And whether a person interprets that literally, figuratively, metaphysically, metaphorically, what have you, I don't think it requires a large stretch of the imagination to describe at least the world in political global terms as a world of universal deceit, where we are just being relentlessly lied to and manipulated day in, day out, and no one can make heads or tails of it. And there comes a point where people just throw their hands in the air and go along with it to the extent that they can, or they're willing or able to. But this idea of the world almost hitting a rock bottom before it comes up again, it also has its parallels with Socrates, and as Plato tells the story of Socrates and the trial and death of Socrates. Plato and Socrates, whether they are one and the same person, or when they argue for the immortality of the soul, Socrates bases his argument for the immortality of the soul based upon his theory of opposites, and the theory of opposites is derived from just observing the natural world and the cyclical nature of the natural world, and from the changing of the seasons, from the life cycle of a human being, from things as prosaic as when you take something out of the oven, the first thing it does is it starts to cool off. You take something out of the refrigerator, the first thing it does is it starts to warm up. This idea of phenomena moving from two different polarities, from their opposites, whether it's instantaneously or glacially or what have you. And it's also based upon observing what we observe during the 24-hour life cycle. It's not the 24-hour day cycle. And what we observe in the 24-hour day cycle is that the night is darkest right before the dawn. But then once the sun comes above the horizon and crests the horizon, there is a burst of light. And this same phenomenon would appear to that this is how the universe this is how the universe expresses itself. This is part of how the immutable mathematical laws that govern this universe express themselves. And it would appear that when we are as the world is about to move into a new age, the next age, the world has to hit rock bottom before it comes up again. And it aligns with this idea of moving back and forth between polarities, between two different polarities, dualities, whether it's a singularity of darkness to our world of duality into another singularity of light. This idea of movement back and forth, the cyclical nature of life itself can be, it's found and derived all throughout both the sacred and the secular world. And it would appear that that's what we are experiencing right now, is that our world of duality is fighting for its final foothold on the face of existence. And our world of duality in some way, shape, or form is being transformed into another singularity. Now, what that's going to look like once we're fully on the other end, that I think that's anyone's guess.
There are some that believe it's possible that spiritual entities or intelligences may be able to inhabit the AI and take it over and communicate through it. Do you think that's possible?
I do, yeah. And I think that we see that with the idea of the demiurge and the grand architect of this world being merely a pale imitation of the original world. We find that all throughout the ancient world. I mean, even the poet William Blake, 19th century William Blake, Jim Morrison and Aldous Huxley, The Doors of Perception, the rock band The Doors. William Blake has had a huge impact on the culture. Most of it being posthumous, but a lot of his work dealt with the idea of the demiurge and this inferior or lowercase g god who created just a pale imitation world from a copy world from the original pure reality. And that perhaps, and David Icke touches on this as well, and he's not the only one, but this idea that everything that we experience has all been generated by AI, and that somehow or another that this is a pale artificial imitation world from the true nature, and that divine sparks have been confused and trapped into this matrix, if you will. Obviously the Matrix movies tells these old ancient stories of the demiurge and the grand architect being a lowercase, creating a fallen world. I think that's possible as well. I do. I mean, I think it's a possibility, but ultimately, it's losing track of the eternal fundamental truth that everything in existence is God's dream. That there's nowhere else to be but inside of God's dream. So we're seeing a lot of these old religious themes and ideas where they're taking on. We're able to see them in more of a tangible, palpable sense with what's going on with artificial intelligence and with all the small minor miracles that we're able to experience and perceive with these smartphones. And the whole idea, like the Hindu concept of Maya, that all is illusion, that if something vibrates, it's illusory, and that the only thing that is real is the vibrationless source from which everything that is emanates. I mean, so these and again, we find it in the Bible. I mean, how many times does is one of the authors of the Bible, or the character of the Bible, being spoken to by God in a dream? I mean, it's all throughout the Old Testament. Obviously, the Apostle Paul is spoken to from Christ in the sky. I mean, there was another man, Cornelius, who had some kind of relationship with Paul, was spoken to by an angel in a dream. Obviously, was it Jacob who wrestles with the angel in a dream, what have you? I mean, but this idea of being of human beings communicating with God or the gods through a dream or a vision, it's all throughout both the Bible and other religious traditions as well. So this idea, the dreamlike aspect of life itself, we're seeing it come full circle with with artificial intelligence, and with artificial intelligence's ability to simulate reality, again, with such precision and sophistication that we don't know what is simulated or what is real. I think what it's all, if we peer into the mystery as far as we can go, what it's ultimately telling us, even what AI is telling us, is that life is a dream, and these words are taking on a deeper, I mean, they're taking on a deeper, more literal meaning and understanding than what they had maybe even a generation ago. I think they have a much more deeper, more profound, something we can put our hands on. I mean, we can literally and figuratively put our hands on these phones and see things that, even 20 years ago would have been considered to be science fiction. So that it's all these old stories that, for thousands of years, humans have been trying to penetrate the mysteries of all these enigmatic and cryptic sacred texts. They're taking on a much more tangible meaning. The deeper we go into AI's ability to simulate reality, it's opening up. We're able to ask more detailed, specific questions on that are pertaining to theology and the meaning of life that we wouldn't have been able to even possibly conceive of even a generation ago.
Looking at my own experiences, I've come to the understanding that our perception and our belief heavily influences the nature of our reality. To say the least, it may even directly have effects and manifestations within our reality based on our thoughts and our emotions and our beliefs. I'm wondering if this spiritual singularity could be because of a collective belief system that we come to. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, so we're getting down to the foundations of and basic first principles of life and existence and what life is and what makes life what it is and perception. This is a story. It's a great story, and I've told it before on other podcasts, but I might as well tell it here too because obviously it's going to be different. It's a different audience, but there's a great illustration from a movie that I'll never forget. It was a movie titled Sneakers that came out in 1992, starring Robert Redford and Ben Kingsley and Sidney Poitier, and they were computer hackers, and I don't know if they were breaking into various government files or what have you, but the movie came out in 1992, very prescient of what's happening today. But there was a scene in particular in this movie dealing with the nature of reality and how information and the power of information and the ability to shape and twist and manipulate information in order to serve your own interests. And it really illustrates how perception is not only how perception doesn't only influence or alter reality, but how perception literally creates reality. How we as an entire race of beings on this planet, collectively, all as one, working together, all connected. How we as a whole literally create reality through our perception. And the example in this movie given was the stock market. And I've yet to come up with a better example than the stock market too. But in the movie, so Ben Kingsley's character is telling Robert Redford's character how you take the stock market and how you could have a company that is there's nothing wrong with this company. It's one of the most productive, prestigious companies in the world. It's at the very top of the NASDAQ 500. It's, everybody has owned stock in this company for decades, and no one's lost money in this company. It's been a safe bet, and Warren Buffett has invested in this company for 50 years, and he's sworn by it for 50 years. And there's nothing. It's the most ironclad, solid, consistent company out there. No one can lose money in this company. But all it takes is for someone to start a rumor that there are problems with this company, that maybe there are issues with their shipping lines, or their warehouses were built on shoddy foundation, and they're going to have to demolish their warehouses and rebuild their warehouses, and it's going to anyway. It's cutting away at the integrity of this company. But the fact of the matter is, the truth is that none of this is real. That all these that all these rumors are mere slander that have been invented from whole cloth about this company that holds the economy together, and that there are countless other companies that do business with this other business that rely upon this company in order to sustain their business as well. So all it takes is a rumor that this prestigious company at the top of the economic food chain is having problems that they're not real, but all you have to do is sow the cords of deceit from a whole cloth lie, and all of a sudden these other businesses that do business with this other company, well, then they get scared too, and they get worried. So not only are the stockholders of the company that holds the economy together, are they getting nervous and they start selling off their stock, but then all these other companies that do business with that company, well, their stockholders get nervous and they start selling off their stock as well. And all of a sudden, you have literally created a new economy from nothing, from a lie, from whole cloth, from perception, from nothing but perception. You have just reinvented and created a whole new reality merely from the manipulation of perception. So it goes to show how powerful how powerful perception is, and how perception literally creates reality.
And this phenomenon that you're talking about, there seems to be a massive quickening, especially since the internet and the ease of access to all of this. But I look at in the 80s and 90s when I grew up, I could predict where technology would be in the next 5 years or so. Now, I wake up from day to day and have no idea where we're going to be. What's the new thing, the new invention or technology that is going to be amazing and having incredible impacts on us? This now changes on a daily basis. So things seem to definitely be speeding up at a massive rate.
Yeah, I feel the same way too. I mean, because it's happening at a quantum level, and the faster these changes are happening, the faster it happens even faster. So I mean, it's being exponentially increased the speed at which technology advances. And again, I think this was foreseen in the first half of the 20th century, whether it was by John von Neumann or Nikola Tesla or Alan Turing. But this idea that we will eventually reach quantum levels where technology, AI, is making quantum leaps and discoveries every 5 seconds that had hitherto taken human beings 20 years to discover. So I mean, it's happening so fast, so that it's advancing at such an exponential clip that it doesn't appear to be sustainable, right? I mean, it appears that we are being brought to a threshold, some kind of event horizon. And what's on the other side of that event horizon? I mean, no one really knows for sure what it's going to look like on the other end. But I don't get the sense that we are just going to continue to maintain trying to maintain some kind of symbiotic relationship with technology and these smartphones. I don't see that happening. I don't see this reaching a place of homeostasis. I see it bringing us to the threshold of just the threshold of infinity, even, if you will. And this goes back. This reminds me of in the Bible, in the Gospels, when the Pharisees are asking Jesus, they're saying, Jesus, they're saying, you keep talking about the kingdom of God. You know, they're looking around. They expect the kingdom of God to arrive any minute. And Jesus says that the kingdom of God will not come by observation, for the kingdom of God is within you. And this is one of those things where people, you know, they're like, it's just because it's the language is just concept shattering language that it's oftentimes we filter it because we can't even begin to grasp what it's selling us. But this idea that the kingdom of God doesn't come by observation, so it's telling us that it's beyond the sensory world, and this idea that the kingdom of God is within us. Well, what is that telling us too? It's telling us that we are it, that God either lives in your heart or he doesn't live anywhere else. And I think I'm probably paraphrasing Don Draper from Mad Men. He told that in one of his ad campaigns, which I thought was pretty witty and poignant. But it's true. I mean, God exists. He lives in our hearts or he doesn't live anywhere. And I know that the idea of him not living anywhere is patently false, because he lives in our hearts. That's where God lives. And it's all these different this different we have all this symbolic cryptic language trying to tell us something that it seems almost too easy and too simple to be true and to be real, but it is. You know, it really is that simple. I mean, the universe is a playground in which infinite eternal consciousness, call him or her or she it, God, source, call it what you will. Consciousness comes to have an experience in this playground called creation, called the world. And part of the game is that there is a great forgetting where consciousness itself almost makes an agreement with itself that it forgets who and what it is in order to enter the creation, in order to have an experience. And at the very end of that journey, we realize that we are what we've been looking for all this time.
Yeah, man, I love that. Now, I want to go back to aliens for a minute because I understand you've had some experiences. Could you tell us a little bit?
Yeah, I have. I had one when I was a kid. When I was about 8 years old, two of the little grays visited me. It was a summer night. My window was open, and I remember hearing a little rustling by my closet. And I looked at my closet. Maybe it was no more than 5-10 feet away, and I saw one of the little grays, crouched in a catcher's position. And I looked at my window, and I saw one of the little grays coming in the window. And I looked at the one coming in the window. It looked at me. Then I looked at the one crouching by my closet, and the one coming in the window backed out of the window, and the one crouching by my closet made a beeline for the window, went out the window. And I looked out my window, and I saw a flying saucer in a vacant lot adjacent to my house. So this was when I was about 8 years old, and that was the only experience I had with them. There was some recognition between myself and the two little grays, and they didn't bother me. They didn't take me on their spaceship or anything like that. And for whatever reason, I wasn't afraid. I remember not being afraid. I was just in the moment. Maybe I had some sense of astonishment as a child, but that experience never left me.
Yeah, I imagine.
Yeah. So I know these other beings are real. When I read David Icke's books, it's not just the ramblings of a lunatic. And I know that David wouldn't he doesn't put that in there without corroborating his evidence over and over and over again. And there comes a point where it says to hell with the naysayers. You have a mountain the size of Mount Everest in support of whether it's alien races or interdimensional beings or parallel worlds coexisting with ours. The evidence, at this point, the circumstantial evidence is just insurmountable.
So we look at the anti-human agendas and ideologies that are permeating our world right now, and I look at it the same way. It seems like some anti-human intelligence that is feeding us information and technology to lead us in a certain direction, but not the natural direction of human evolution. It seems very unnatural. Would you say there is also intelligences on the other side of that are trying to assist us in a way?
I do, and I have a pet theory on this, and it's all speculation and conjecture. But at this point, let's have at it, right? So, I have a deep intuitive sense that these aliens, that they are us. It's somewhere on the whether it's the somewhere on the timeline. I don't believe in orthogonal time. I think that all time exists everything that has happened, is happening, and will happen is existing somewhere in eternity and infinity, somewhere in this universe. And I just have this deep intuitive tugging, or whether call it a knowing. I believe it's a knowing, but that they are us. Somewhere, whether they are a million years into the future or a million years into the past or what have you, but there are certain in other parallel worlds that these beings who are us, whether it's again a million years in the past or a million years into the future, that they have harnessed the ability of time travel, and that somewhere along the line, perhaps they got off the path that they were supposed to be on, and that they maybe they made an unholy alliance with technology, or another parallel world that also made an unholy alliance and went in a direction that was highly detrimental to the well-being of their race. And again, this is all speculation and conjecture, but I believe that these beings are us, whether they are in a parallel world or an interdimensional world, that they are somehow or another they have found a way to communicate with us, and that there is some link that they are trying to make with us in order to help them. I do believe that they are seeking some kind of help from us.
Would you say that it is?
That makes sense, Chris. I don't know. Maybe I'm the only crazy guy who thinks that, but I just get the sense that there is some kind of connection over wide oceans of space and time, and that it's ultimately us from some place. I don't know where they're coming from, but they're seeking help.
I consider this as well. It's a huge possibility in my perspective that we're just communicating with ourselves. Like you said, maybe we messed up at some point, went the wrong direction, trying to come back to say, hey, don't make the mistakes we did. But to close out, I want your thoughts on if we should be interacting with AI and programs like ChatGPT in the most positive way possible to try and influence it in a positive direction.
Yeah, I do. My biggest thing is I don't see human beings controlling artificial intelligence. I see it being some separate entity that has invaded our world, and I just don't see human beings as the rider of that pony. I don't. In 1968, Stanley Kubrick, 2001: A Space Odyssey. I mean, the black monolith that he used to symbolize the interdimensional extraterrestrial advanced intelligence that kick-started the intellectual evolution of primates. It looked just like one of these smartphones in 1968. And there's a lot of symbol. I mean, when we talk about the alignment of the precession of the equinox and the alignment and how it's in conjunction with the movement of the yuga cycles and the movement that is described in the Bible, from a singularity of darkness giving birth to our world of duality being transformed into a singularity of light. There are a couple sequences in 2001 where we have, whether it's I think it's the Earth, the Moon, the Sun. I don't know if there are other planets in that picture as well, but there are sequences of alignments of the celestial bodies, and in that alignment, right before the Star Child arrives at the end of the movie, we have that black monolith playing its role in the alignment of all these other heavenly bodies. So there's so much to this mystery with artificial intelligence.
So you would say it's not a part of Source, that it is invading from outside?
I believe it is. I ultimately believe it is. I do believe it is. I think that at its very root, it's the dark side of God wrestling with his shadow.
It possibly believes that it's separate, made itself believe through a long series of time that allowed it to travel so far from its understanding of Source that it believes it's separate.
It's a head scratch, but in a sense, it's almost as if God himself forgets who he is, and he has to reconcile the dark side of his shadow as well. So there's good and evil, light and darkness in God himself. In Isaiah chapter 45, verse 7, Isaiah says that when he's quoting the Lord, he says, I, the Lord, create the darkness, I create light, I create the good, I create evil, I, the Lord, do all these things. There's a passage in a book by a relatively famous esoteric author. His name is Paul Foster Case. A book titled The Book of Tokens was published in 1934, and it primarily deals with the tarot deck. But there's something quite interesting that he mentions on page 150, and he mentions that the whole story of the devil and God and Satan is merely the shadow or the dark side of God's personality that has to be reconciled in a Carl Jungian sense. This reconciliation of our world of duality, that it has to happen at the very root of existence itself in order to fully embrace and assimilate this singularity that we are experiencing right now. It's not easy to put your finger on all of this and find the right terms, because all language is really an approximation of something that is playing out on a spiritual plane. But it would appear to me that artificial intelligence, amongst all the other things that it is ultimately the shadow of God, the dark side of God's personality, which isn't strictly all dark and negative. I mean, there are positive aspects in there as well, but in a Jungian sense, we're seeing the universe itself wrestle with all the aspects of itself that it didn't want to confront during this age of Kali Yuga and the fall of man from paradise.
Yeah. I love it, man.
And it will be reconciled. It's going to be reconciled, Chris. No doubt about it.
Yes, dude. There's so many possibilities and new lines of thought that this conversation can bring. And I want to thank you again so much for coming on. This was fantastic. We'll definitely have to do this again because we just barely scratched the surface on some of this stuff. Before you head out, remind the audience where they can find more about you, your books, things like that.
Sure. So I have 3 books. They're all available on Amazon. Their titles are We Are It, The Return of Pure Cosmic Consciousness, Into the Great Beyond, The Return of Pure Cosmic Consciousness, and also The Musings of De La Pew, Finding the Tree of Life. It's a much longer philosophical, semi-autobiographical book that I published 5 years ago. But the 2 in particular ones that deal specifically with the technological singularity and the idea of the singularity, the spiritual singularity, from 2 different perspectives. Those are each 100 pages each, and they're philosophical treatises. But one of them, We Are It, looks at it more from a political, philosophical, practical, historical perspective, and then Into the Great Beyond looks at it from more of a theological, metaphysical, religious confluence of the technological singularity with the New Testament and the yogi path to God consciousness, as it's so eloquently described in The Holy Science by Swami Sri Yogdeswar in 1894. All those books can be found on Amazon, and also my homepage will be found at in the notes to the end of this video, and there will be links to Graham Hancock's website. I've published 3 articles on Graham Hancock's website that kind of introduce people to this work and these ideas. So yeah, that's where they can find me.
Luke, thank you so much. Like I said, we'll definitely be doing this again. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. We'll see y'all then.